and am well versed in death. But I want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Mo, and this is The Missing Piece.
Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Trish. This is The Missing Piece. We are broadcasting live out of New Orleans 105.3 FM and United Public Radio Network. We are also on broadcasting archives on Roku now. You can find us on SoundCloud, Podbean, pretty much any of your favorite podcast stations. So give those a look if you happen to miss our regular live shows. Be sure to participate in the chat rooms. Engage with your hosts. We all love. I know I'm getting better. I know what everybody's going to say, but I don't always. Oh my goodness. I don't even know if anybody could hear any of what was just said. Let me start over. I was saying, engage with your hosts. We love it when we get feedback. And I do want to thank Carnation as well as the station for sponsoring my show. So, without further ado, tonight, I don't know where, I intuitively talk about things. Sometimes it 99% of the time, it's things that I have researched over the years, but didn't write about it, didn't release it, whatever, because it wasn't the right timing. And then I just get this wild hair. So sometimes, when I know extensive information about certain topics, it's not like I didn't just pull out those out of thin air that day. It's actually because it's something that interests me or something that I have been doing a lot of research on for a long time. So that is what tonight's show is about. But first, I do want to say, me and my moons, we have a full moon of April coming up. That is the pink moon. That's going to be happening on April 6th, actually at 5, I think like 5:30 in the morning, 5:34 a.m. Um, but as always, it's the 3 days prior, as well as the 3 days pre and post full moon that you get that energy. So just be careful out there. People are kind of on edge, have higher anxiety because it is a lot more energy during those times. So if you're on the road, you'll see cases of road rage. You'll see things like that escalate. Even people with heart problems and such. ERs, any nurse or doctor will tell you that they have an influx of patients during that time. So be mindful of that. Otherwise, I love the full moon energy. So that's always exciting. However, tonight we're talking about everybody's favorite. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely, for me, this is more talking about the historical aspect of vampires and the folklore of, I don't even know how to pronounce, uh, because it's more prevalent in the Northeast. Um, and then as far as the books, a lot of the books and the movies and such, this is the far west, as far as northwest, as far as like Alaska, Canada, things like that. So a lot of you probably know more on this specific um, being than I do. However, I love the vampire community. Um, Obviously, I'm friends with vampires. We'll sell all the monsters. So, um, but there's a lot of kind of cross reference throughout history between, obviously, different blood types, different, um, even going back, when we were talking about the cannibalistic giants, things like that. So this one it it sounds to me almost Egyptian. However, there's no proof of that. There's no documented evidence of that. Um, it is native. Um, it's a Potamkin, um, and that's it. That's exactly how it's spelled as well. It's a creature in Native American mythology in the northern North America, anyways. It's a giant fanged sea monster that lives in the Passamaquoddy Bay and pulls people in to eat them, particularly careless children. Um, it's said to have long red hair, and in some versions, it was a human woman before being changed into a serpent. One interpretation of the Apo- Ap- Apotamkin myth is that it was used to instill fear into children to keep them from venturing into areas alone and without parental guidance. In popular culture, it was briefly referenced in the 2008 film Twilight. It's often mistakenly called a vampire by non Native Americans, especially since it was named as such in the film. But in Maliseet and Passamaquoddy legends, it's completely unrelated to vampires. Why do I bring this one up? Because um because obviously I have been growing up as a redhead, a natural redhead, obviously. I have been teased and compared to pretty much every monster out there. It doesn't matter what it is. Um, so the what's interesting about this one, okay, is well, I'll get to that in a minute. So the legendary creature has fascinated people for centuries. Its origins dating back to Native American folklore known as the ice giants. The apot I can't even say it. Apotomkin is said to inhabit the frozen tundras of the far north, preying on those who dare to venture too close to its territory. But is there any truth to these tales? Some believe that it's simply a myth, of course, while others swear they've encountered the creature firsthand. So, whether you are a skeptic or a believer, there's no denying that the legend of the Apotomkin is a fascinating. It's a fascinating topic to me that's captured the imagination of people for generations, obviously, and been passed down. um, so we're going to delve into the world of this creature, and try to uncover the truth behind the myth. The origins, um, legend has it that its roots in obviously in Native American folklore, particularly among the Inuit and the Yupik tribes who inhabit the Arctic regions of North America. And according to legend, it is a giant humanoid creature, that lives in the frozen tundras of the far north. Obviously, it's said to be incredibly fast, agile, and it has white fur that blends in perfectly with the snow and ice. It's said to be incredibly strong, capable of ripping apart its prey. So, in my opinion, if we're reading something that natives documented or wrote about, hundreds, thousands of years ago, something that's white blends in perfectly with the snow and ice, giant creature, humanoid even, in some descriptions. So your first thought would probably be, well, one, a polar bear, right? Just picture yourself if it was a crazy blizzard or even a snow squall, wind was blowing, and polar bears can be look huge if they stand up, especially. Um, and so imagine if you ran into a polar bear that was standing on two legs. Bears do that a lot, actually. And but you're in the middle of this storm and had never seen anything like that in your life. Obviously, it's got blowing white fur, blends in with the snow, giant monster, and they did polar bears are one of they will hunt just for blood, for hundreds of miles. So, um, that's one theory of mine that that happened during those times. Maybe they just assumed they were seeing a monster, and obviously, especially during, I don't know if you've ever traveled a long ways in the snow, but you start kind of getting what is it? What's it called? The snow blindness, right? So you start that starts happening, and then obviously your imagination starts running wild, I'm sure, especially if you were out in the middle of, the Arctic tundra for that matter. Um, so I don't know. This one's a little, and then you go to ships and documentation like that and such, and this goes into like mermaids and everything else, but this one specifically was part serpent as far as that goes. Um, Anyways, moving on. Um, this legend's been passed down through generations of the Inuit and Yupik people, and there's many variations of the story. So some versions describe it as being a malevolent being that preys on humans, while others portray it as benevolent, or kind of a guardian of the Arctic wilderness. Despite those differences, however, the common theme that you see throughout all of these stories is the fear and the respect that the Apotamkin commands. So the origin of that name is unclear. Some scholars believe that it comes from the Inuit word aput, which means snow. Others believe it comes from the Yupik word Apotamok, which means giant. Whatever its origins, I know I keep saying that word, origins. Um, the name has become synonymous with the legendary creature that has captured the imaginations of people for centuries. So there's see, this is another thing. While it's been around for centuries, there have been relatively few reported sightings of the creature in modern times. However, we're starting to see that trend come back, right? In almost every cryptid, every legend, folklore, all things are coming back around. Even dinosaurs, are being spotted all over the world, apparently. And obviously, many of those stories being investigated were either hoaxes or, another type of animal or whatever. But the point is, um, I have a theory on that as well, right? Either A, everything in this universe, well, obviously with the theory of general relativity and things like that, um, quantum physics, everything in regards to universe, on a basis that everything exists that will ever exist already does. What if all of these things, dinosaurs, any type of cryptids, extraterrestrials, what have you, what if everything kind of has a turn, right? Has a turn at existing, and then they have like a period of time where it's like being benched in a soccer game or football or whatever. Um, they have to take a timeout for a few centuries before they can reemerge. Kind of like if you've ever seen Jeepers Creepers, he comes around, like every 50 some years or so. I don't know what the exact number is, but emerges from his cave to obviously abduct people and uh, take their eyeballs. So so what if certain movies like that had some factual basis to them? What if these things Okay, let's go with dinosaurs, for instance. What if they actually are able to make a comeback? Um, whether it be due to man assisted, human assisted technology, alien assisted technology, or just by natural occurring um, things happening in the world in the biosphere of it, the conditions were right for it to come back. What if that were to happen today? You know, can you imagine a giant dinosaur? Like I've been having a problem finding a house that allows pets for that matter. Can you imagine if people I'm because I guarantee you somebody's gonna get a pet raptor or brontosaurus just to start with. Everybody's gonna go Flintstone it out. So can you imagine how hard it would be with housing to to have dinosaurs as pets? But on a real note, if movies, when I first saw Jurassic Park and where they um took the blood from the mosquito that was hardened in the amber of an ancient, the sap of an ancient tree, that if you think about it, and if you think consider what man has done to modern genome experiments and what is being done now with DNA programming, that's a very real concept in this day and age, which is crazy. Um, so when Dave and I were talking about what were we talking? Oh, yes, Plum Island, um, and Lyme disease. Outside of um, the northeastern part of many of those states now, it's a very big deal. But when we were discussing that, it's the same concept. Like they start doing these experiments and growing these things that they shouldn't be on an island, thinking it would never affect civilization or mankind, and then somehow there's an outbreak. Um, and so I always think about that, like, what, I mean, we already know that there are even our own government, other countries, etc., are doing experiments, crossbreeding humans, animals, um, because there's a loophole in that. It is illegal I believe in the entire world to crossbreed an animal with a human DNA. However, it is not illegal, nor is it stated anywhere that you cannot crossbreed human DNA into animal DNA or animal experiments, which doesn't make any sense. I think it's just this is actually on the government website, by the way. I mean, there's so many of them, but that fact is so. It's one of those things like the wording, was changed to fit their agenda. So, um, back to the Apotamkin. Um, so many people thought the actual name means giant. Um, and one of um even though it was said to be able to disappear, into the snow and ice almost immediately in an instant. One of the most famous sightings of this creature um, was in the 1930s when a group of fur trappers claimed to have encountered the creature in the Canadian Arctic. And according to their account, it attacked their camp one night, killing several of their dogs and leaving behind huge footprints in the snow. So this sounds almost like the Yeti or, something like that. The trappers claim that the creature was incredibly fast, agile. They were unable to get a good look at it before it disappeared back into the wilderness. And in more recent years, there's been obviously fewer reported sightings of it. Um, and obviously, many skeptics believe that this is because the creature never existed in the first place. While others argue that it's just become more elusive over time, or, it could have actually gone extinct. Um, so, the characteristics of this thing um, is that it's humanoid in appearance, obviously, giant humanoid, stands over 10 feet tall, um, obviously covered in white fur. Its eyes glow red in the darkness, um, and it's capable of outrunning anything incredibly fast. Um, but then others state that it's helped lost travelers find their way, back to civilization, or um I don't really, I think there's been so many different, and it always says particularly it becomes malevolent, um preying on humans, particularly to those who venture too close to its territory. Um so again, this, in my opinion, all of these things point to uh like a polar bear. I don't know. What do you all think? Do you think that this sounds more like a polar bear, or do you think that this is a completely new cryptid? Well, it wouldn't be new, obviously, it's very old. However, do you think it's separate from all of the other reported cryptids we've ever, there's so many monsters and legends, but that we've ever heard of, they're the most famous. Um, I think more recently, I think the reason this has come up recently is because people are doing, as it should be, but are trying to bring up every possible reason to bring awareness to the preservation of the Arctic ecosystem. And so I mean, yeah, I agree. If there was even the remote possibility of, a like a group or a clan of these beings living in that area, then 100% we should do everything we can to preserve those things. And as I always agree with, um for the preservation of any ecosystem, obviously, um because there, of course, with anything, there's lack of physical evidence, um never any proof, concrete proof of its existence, obviously. um But I don't always dismiss that, because birds, for instance, do you know why we don't ever find, all of these ancient birds that supposedly existed throughout history? Well, because it's due to the makeup of they have much more delicate bone system, skeletal system. I say bone system. They have a much more delicate skeletal system. And so the makeup of those, it breaks down much faster, um, as far as decomposition goes. They decompose at a much faster rate than any other, than the skeletal system of any other being. So that's why you don't find, that doesn't mean they didn't exist. That just means we don't have proof after the fact that they existed, you know? It'd be much like an entire civilization, um, I don't know, burning up somehow. We wouldn't have any proof of that. We'd have a lot of ashes. I mean, sure, just like cremation or anything. There'd be, bones left over and stuff. But I'm saying as far as entire skeletons of these creatures, fossils, things like that. No, you don't find that very often with birds because their makeup breaks down um, at a very quick rate. So I didn't actually know that until about a year ago. Um, so the funny thing about this is, I think that we turn a lot of these. I know my parents did anyways. And yes, it was for the safety of our children. Like, I'm sure my parents, it's like the boogeyman. Everybody told us there was a boogeyman, not to go places we shouldn't when we were little. Um, and it does. It invokes fear. Um, but essentially, it's with the intention of keeping your child safe, and that's initially how they thought that this creature first existed. I don't know, I don't understand where it went from. I don't understand where it went from being a serpent to a like a giant yeti looking beast. But again, the reason I use this example is because that's exactly how folklore works. Like, it changes based on perspective, it changes throughout history, it changes based on who tells you the story for that matter. Um so that's something that I always found interesting. Now here's what I would um because I grew up in the mountains and very remote places, and I have witnessed and been around elementals. I will say this. Um, the natives in the Arctic, in that tundra, they also there's a group of elementals, um, or I mean it's kind of a race actually that they refer to as the cold ones. Um, they're semi corporeal elemental beings, and those can appear as wailing humanoid specters of swirling snow and vapor. So, if you've ever experienced any type of elemental, even in hauntings and paranormal, and investigations, things like that, you will know that they can actually uh, kind of shapeshift or basically turn into I mean anything they want, or give that illusion. So it's not, it's not completely, if everybody was giving a different depiction of this creature, then it wouldn't necessarily be untrue because it did show up as something different to everyone. And if you think about it, many people do that. Like you act a different way. What if your outside body matched, like the way you look externally matched the exact, I guess, interpretation in your own mind that you projected or presented towards other people all the time? Um what if it matched that image? That's a scary thought. Like, how would it, because we all appear differently to everyone, we appear differently to our family than we do our employers, or you might appear differently to, I'm saying in your own mental image or your own projection, to like your children or other people's children than you would interacting with other adults. I think this is no different, although dealing with elementals again, they could shapeshift into an animal or a person or a 10-foot tall, white furred whatever in the snow. Absolutely. That's that's something I could get behind as far as the theories of this thing. Um Now, I came across something else, so Bram Stoker's Dracula used to be one of my absolutely favorite movies. Um It was. Before we get to that, I did want to share. I don't know if anyone remembers watching this week's movie review, I guess, from the past for you all is 30 Days of Night. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but it was, oh my goodness, it was a, let me bring this up. Let's see, I can share my screen. Okay. So I will hit play on this.
We need you at the station.
Copy that.
Board the windows. Try to hide. They're coming.
They? Who are they?
They're like vampires, you know?
Vampires don't exist. They're tearing through everyone's home.
We can last a month.
Okay. So that was 30 Days of Night. If you have never seen that movie, it well, for one thing, based on studies now that have been done on what happens to, well, I know I get real grumpy if I'm vitamin D deficient. A lot of things start breaking down in your body, your bones, obviously. It affects your sleep habits. It affects your blood pressure, pretty much everything, actually. but mostly people who have a vitamin D deficiency. Um, if it were to that level where we didn't see daylight for, a month without taking any type of artificial supplements, um, would probably get real angry and real agitated real easy. So I do believe if it was just darkness all the time, that people might start killing each other, things like that, because that's been shown. I came from upstate New York where we didn't see the sunshine for, I don't know, I mean, very rarely for like 6 months straight. It wasn't complete darkness like Alaska, but I'm saying as far as like gloomy days, didn't get a lot of sunshine and a lot of snow. So when that happens, obviously it causes seasonal personality, or I'm sorry, seasonal depression disorder. Um, and so I do think that a lot of negative things would happen in that case, but um, if you start thinking about like in apocalyptic terms, I guess, or like the movie vampires and such, although most vampires I know are not zombie like creatures like that. um they're very friendly. um as with anything, I'm sure there's good and bad in the world. um but I thought it was something interesting to consider, all these movies that, since I don't really watch that many current ones, although lately I've been watching more. Um, all these ones from like 5 years ago, 7 years ago are coming back now. And I think it's really interesting how they correlate to certain things going on in the world. Um, Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about as far as vampires go is, well, first off, how many of you think that you would be able to survive that? There's been many kind of analysis done on those type of scenarios and that movie specifically. And the entire, I guess, death survival analysis has to do with three different levels of what would happen at the world's end. The first one being, well, I guess, and how people would die in those terms. The first one being, kind of the majority of people, the unlucky ones, just the people that don't really, weren't prepared, didn't really pay attention to what was going on in the world. Um, the theory is that those type of people would die first. The second being uh, the second phase, I guess, would be the mentally weak or those who had a hero complex. And then the third, is just kind of the rude people, like the meaner people in society, kind of the assholes of the world, that they would probably, because they're too mean to die, obviously, um they would be the third to finally die. But do you think that you could survive in these different types of scenarios? um Let me know what you think about that, because I think it's interesting. I should do a survey, like a poll on that. Um, Now, so this past, was it this? Yeah, it was this past year. I wanted to go to make a trip to Romania, more than anything. But of course, I had so many trials and tribulations in the last year in my own life that I wasn't able to do so. I do hope to go, obviously, soon. I mean, granted, nobody knows what's coming next as far as travel or passports or anything like that. So, um, obviously that's all up in the air. But I think it would be amazing to actually go to like Transylvania and see um Dracula's castle. Excuse me, and things like that. There was a magazine article. It was from a long time ago. It was or not magazine, I apologize. It was in the newspaper. It was a Saturday Evening Post. When I was initially researching this a long time ago, I pulled this up, and it was called A Sentimental Journey to Dracula's Hometown. Well, why this was extremely interesting actually is because um, the man in this documentary style article uh, states a lot of things that you never hear anyone talk about in any type of interview or anything regarding um, Dracula. Not even any of Bram Stoker's research. So that's what I found intriguing um, with the Sentimental Journey to Dracula's Hometown, because it actually goes into there's a lot of other details that you never hear, you know. Um, I didn't realize. So in Romania, um, they actually, well, in this documentary anyways, they stated that the peasants were the ones that buried people on top of the highest hill in the village, like all of them. Um, and it was actually like the translation of the names of these towns. The first one, um, I don't know what the first one. It was called Cluj. I can't pronounce it. CLUJ. Um, it's the first town on out of the Bistrita, Bistrita. I don't know how to. I'm completely butchering that as well. Anyways, it's the first town outside of that, but it's the literal meaning of that name is hell in Romanian, and so that's right outside um, the first little village, which is never mentioned in any of Bram Stoker's works. Um, so they, you know, it's not a coincidence that the road from the Golden Crown literally, quite literally, ran into hell. Um, so apparently in those mountains, you know, obviously, they get a lot of snow and cold air and things like that. In the summertime, spring, summer, there's waterfalls, all kind like jagged rocks. You know, the I can just picture like the imagery of the forest, you know, being all dark and creepy anyways. And so I think things like that tend to add theatrical, I guess, elements to our imagination. Um, but I do find it interesting that like this historical town, which I have not heard ever mentioned, is quite literally called hell. You know, um, but there was a book, Dracula spoke of Harker, of this very land, of the ground fought over by Wallachian, Saxon, Turk. Why, there's hardly a foot of soil in all of this region that has not been enriched by the blood of men, patriots, or invaders. In old days, there were stirring times when the Austrian and the Hungarian came up in hordes, and the patriots went out to meet them. And so while this person's, you know, depicting current times, which this was back in the 80s when that was written, um, it was initially, I believe it was published in 1965 on March 27th, ironically. Um, and so he says there's no people at all now, save for an occasional stroller along with rutted road in one remote mountain town. A score of peasants gathered together for Sunday outdoor dances, things like that. Um, but there's others. Most people on the mountain get out of town or go somewhere else, go home, to wherever they came from before the sun goes down. They will not stay there after dark. Um, and so it says that, um, as he's going up the mountain to see Dracula's castle, it was getting dark. Um, and he was also reading, this is almost like Bram Stoker's depiction, but this man was also an attorney. He's actually reliving everything that happened in Bram Stoker's Dracula in his own life, technically. So he's reading everything on the way up the mountain, just as in the movie, but this is an actual person's account of this, obviously. Um, And Dracula said, I seek not gaiety nor mirth, not the bright voluptuousness of much sunshine and sparkling waters, which please the young and gay. I am no longer young, and my heart, the weary years of mourning over the dead, is not attuned to mirth. Moreover, the walls of my castle are broken, the shadows are many, and the wind breathes cold through the broken battlements and casements. I love the shade and the shadow, and would be alone with my thoughts when I may. And so he continues. Um, they go up the mountain. It says the air grew chill. Uh, Once a group of workmen arranged to build a castle, but things did not go well. Each night, unseen hands destroyed the work of the day. In a vision, it was given to them that the castle could never be finished unless a woman was buried in the thick walls, and it must be the first woman who happened by. That first woman was the wife of one of the workmen. They slew her and put her in the walls. Her little son missed her and came up to the castle to be with his father. The child heard a voice crying to him. He recognized the voice and called, Mother, mother. The voice screamed, Stones press me, my son. The boy attacked the walls of the castle. Attacking, he fell dead. Once there was a noble youth who loved a peasant girl. His family forbade their marriage. Together the lovers walked into a lake. Together they were taken from the water, but separately they were buried on opposite sides of a church graveyard. Soon lilies sprouted from each grave and day by day crept towards each other. In the end, they met and so formed a garland for the church. The sun was setting on the cloudless sky. Our driver wonders if we should turn back. We cannot go all the way up through the pass. It leads into Russia. I said, have him stop the car. I got out and walked down the road and turned a curve and stood alone in Transylvania as the sun went down behind the high peaks. See, this is exciting. Like, I would love to be there just for the historical aspects. I think it would be absolutely amazing. Um, it was very sharp. It was a very sharp little hill by the rushing stream in the valley. There was a tiny woodcutter's shack. No smoke came from its chimney. I went past it and past another hillock. A chill wind blew, and the sun winked down behind a precipice. I went across the soggy land, leading into the shallow stream and crossed by, leaping from rock to rock. Then I stood still in the absolute silence and the half dark. I waited. After a while, I went back to the car. We drove back to Cluj in silence. We saw hardly a soul, only a few horse wagons lighting the way home with their flaring torches. So there's a few things that were never stated aside from Count Dracula's castle, the road leading there being named named basically Hell. But aside from that, so when I lived in New York, there was a castle that was never finished, and a man from Europe initially built it for obviously for his bride, and she actually never got to even see the castle because she died right before it was complete. And to this day, it was never finished. And so that's what that that all reminds me of New York. Um, but they obviously couldn't continue on their journey due to how close they were to Russia at the time, which is equally, then you get into things like how how many of these stories also revolve around wars of the past, and when people could be, you know, exhausted and malnourished and things like that. But in this case, it's interesting because the entire article is from the perspective and the point of view of a man who is basically reliving the exact movie of Dracula, of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And recently, with all of these movies I've been, reviewing and showing you all, how many movies can you think of that have been closely related to something in your life? And I think that's how they're meant to be. I think we're it's just that most of the time we're just holding parts, or like we're like extras in everyone else's movies. Very rarely, I guess, do we even consider that we're directing our own all the time, every day. Um, so I thought that was another another interesting um point. If you go back through, I'm sorry, that was my daughter and the squeaky door with the cat. Scared me half to death. I'm glad I'm not on film tonight because yeah, like things like that happen. Um, but and see, it totally gets me off track on what I was even talking about. Um, I'm sure that's the purpose though, right? With kids and animals. Um, but as I'm reading, as I've been reading, one moment, please. Yeah, as I've been reading different articles and things, um, I'm back. I apologize. I don't know what happened to the feed there. I must have gotten knocked off here. I knew something was going to happen like this tonight. I just, I always have that feeling. Anyways, where were we? Oh, so much of this month, yesterday was World Autism Awareness Day, and April is Autism Awareness Month. So I am going to be talking about that with my own journey, as well as that's something I meant to mention at the beginning of my show, um, and talk about how it affects, our lives. And I'm also going to be interviewing a few people who have are either autistic themselves, or have family members, or care for someone who is autistic as well. So, um, if you all remember, last year I had on Rachel Kleinsmith, who I absolutely love. The Swamp Witch. She also um, is the founder of. She has Vampyre Cosmetics, and um, is back in New Orleans, actually. So I hope to be able to speak with her again. She actually, I should post pictures actually sometime. She came through on a full moon, I believe, in May to Topeka, and we met at the Topeka Cemetery, where they have the mausoleums, and it was really neat. However, it was incredibly hot. No, it wasn't. It couldn't have been May. It was probably, well, maybe. I mean, Kansas gets, like 90 degrees sometimes at the end of May. So, but that was fun. Check out her line of cosmetics, as well as her magazine. She has that as well, and an amazing person. She also used to live in Topeka, and then I also interviewed Denny Sargent, and I am also going to have him back on sometime this year. Um, he's from the Wolves of the West. He's from the Seattle area, so such a fun guy, so informative. His book is amazing. I've also posted that on my website, which is almost done. I know I said that like I don't know, 6 months ago, but this time it really is. Like I've been working really hard during these last few weeks on those things, and so I'm gonna have write-ups about everyone that I've ever had on here, and obviously get back to um, having guests and such on. I just had a very long period of my life where I had a lot going on with family and with moving, and just life in general. So on my new channel, um, I do. I'm gonna go live all the time, like on my different adventures. Obviously, I'm gonna go live on location. Um, and that's something I'm really looking forward to, because that's my passion. I travel to places, and I research the history, and I create photography and art out of those, and write, obviously. So April's also the month of poetry. I am going to release quite a few of my poems this month. Um, And then I'm going to be doing the historical research from a different perspective, on the Titanic, because um, that's something that, now that many of the archives of historical documentation are online, within the last 2 or 3 years, it makes it really exciting to go back and re-examine things that you've researched in the past because you could learn so many new things based on historical documented evidence that maybe wasn't available to us before, you know. Um, so to be able to look up those ship logs and passenger logs and things like that, and all of their port, what family members traveled with them and everything like that is absolutely amazing. Um, and then during all of or after I research all of that, um, there's actually a Titanic museum um, in very near me in the Midwest in Branson, Missouri. Um, and I'm going to go there. It's actually the world's largest Titanic museum attraction. Um, it's like literally a replica of the Titanic, but it does have a lot of the actual um, artifacts and things that were on the Titanic. So I look forward to that. Um, that's something, even after I teach my kids this specific lesson on the Titanic, that we're going to go do. So I'm excited about that. It has over 400 artifacts on display. It also features a replica of the giant grand staircase that was, that was in the Titanic. Not the movie, like the the actual Titanic, along with fully styled ship cabins. So since none of us, because because it sank, and none of us can actually see the Titanic aside from the ocean floor, I thought this was the next best thing. So I'm excited to go do that. Um, And as of this year, see, before this attraction wouldn't allow personal photos on the ship, like in the actual ship in the museum. This is the first time they've started allowing that, so that's super exciting. Um, I wonder if they would allow me to recreate poses like on the grand staircase because that would be really cool. So I'm gonna see about that. That's what's coming up in April. I'm gonna make it a short night. I'm exhausted. I've been doing so much, y'all. But I'm excited for things to come, and I obviously, um, you all are seeing my my progression through different stages. So, um, but there's better things to come. So, thank you for joining me tonight, and have a wonderful week. Again, manifest your desires with the full moon, but also be careful because that's a lot of energy out there. Enjoy it. Again, it'll be from now until, well, obviously until the 6th, and then 3 days after that, so the 9th. Other than that, have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.